Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And the most important updates are coming from Ocheretino direction, from the northern, let's say, Avdiivka area. The Russians continue advancing further in direction of Arkhangelska, Keramik, and Novokalinovo and Novoalexandrovka. Most likely the Russians still haven't managed to clear Novokalinovo and Keramik. There are very heavy clashes inside of the villages. The Russians are trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back. The Ukrainians more or less managed to stabilize the situation. Maybe today the Ukrainians will provide us additional updates. Maybe the Russians will provide us, let's say, the final confirmation of the complete clearing of the area. But for now, we have what we have. Furthermore, we start receiving additional updates from inside of Ocheretino. If you remember, we, let's say, split it Ocheretino in two parts. This area, we have already colored this area with red, but we still haven't received even a single geolocated confirmation that the Russians control this part of, let's say, of Ocheretino, this one. And the rest, and when talking about this part, we received significant number of geolocations confirming this. Today we got, during the previous night, we got additional update of how the Ukrainians were bombing the Russian position. So that's why we have adjusted the map, by adding additional black, high-rise area black of the town to the Russian controlled territory. Very interesting details we got today from the deep state mappers. As you can see, according to them, the Russians improved their positions in direction of the town by the name of Novoalexandrovka. So that was approximately the Russian progress, the Russian, let's say, attack. And now they show that this territory, this one, is already under the Russian control. And the most important, that according to Deep State, they show that the territory around this Russian foothold, we're talking about this territory, is already in the gray zone. So, of course, it's very interesting development of the situation. We need to wait more to get additional updates, either from the Russian or from the Ukrainian side. But if this information is confirmed, then it's a significant problem for the Ukrainians. And most likely, if this situation is confirmed, the Russians will continue their offensive operation further in the direction of Novoalexandrovka. So we'll follow the situation. Now we're moving further to the south in direction of we are moving to, let's say, this artillery pocket. We have two interesting updates. The Ukrainian sources reported that during the previous evening and the previous night, the Russians conducted few offensive operations in direction of the village by the name of Novopokrovskaya. And according to the Ukrainians, the Russians entered the first building and the first, let's say, streets and the first buildings of the village. So the clashes are taking place here. And the sources reported that the Russians conducted another offensive operation in direction of Umanskaya. And also the Russians managed to enter the first buildings of the village itself. So the clashes are taking place in those two villages, and the Russians continue pushing Ukrainians further to the Karlovka Water Reserve with the purpose to create a cauldron to destroy as many as possible Ukrainian soldiers on this direction. We continue receiving updates from Nitailova. We have updates from different mappers confirming the Russian progress. So around 30% under Russian control. We have discussed the video yesterday. And we have another report from very reliable Russian sources that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians forced the Ukrainians to fall back from Nitailova itself. Currently, there are no more Ukrainians, maybe some Ukrainians who haven't managed to abandon their positions when it was time. When there was some time. Now the Russians continue clearing the operation, and most likely during the next 48 hours we're going to receive additional updates of Russian complete control over the village, and the Russians will be able to start moving further. During the previous 24 hours we haven't received almost nothing from Krasnogorovka. There are very heavy clashes. Most likely the Ukrainians managed to redeploy additional reinforcements and reserves. Currently the clashes are taking place in the high-rise area. The clashes are taking place in the central part. The Ukrainians, this is divided question for the Ukrainians to, let's say, stabilize the line of combat contact and not to allow the Russians to establish control over the stronghold, let's say, by the let's say the beginning of the victory dates. That's very important media victory for Ukrainians. And from the other side, we understand that it's also very important for the Russians to capture, or at least to collapse, the Ukrainian defense in Krasnogorovka until the same date. Then we're moving to Marinka, Novomikhailovka. After a very short operational pause, after a few days of operational pause, the sources reported that the Russians continue improving their positions, and as a result of clashes, the Russians captured additional 3 lines in the fields, let's say on the, northeast of Paraskovyevka, and also the Russians managed to improve their positions additionally on the southern direction of Paraskovyevka. For now, we haven't received geolocated videos, but the Russians are trying to improve and to prepare the further offensive operation in direction of Konstantinovka and Paraskovyevka from the north, and the same attack, the same direction, but from the south. Ugledar, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the town, the stronghold. As we can see, the 36th mechanized motorized brigade of the armed forces of Russian Federation is responsible for offensive operation on this direction. Lots of videos, lots of geolocations, a lot of explosions. The Russians still haven't started the ground operation, but the artillery operation, aviation preparation is ongoing. We haven't received anything during the night from Vremivka tactical bridgehead, some updates from Zaporozhye, nothing special. Very interesting details we continue receiving from Zaporozhye. The Ukrainians most likely understand that the Russians sooner or later will start their offensive operation in direction of Zaporozhye itself, because this town, this very big town, is located very close to the Zaporozhye direction, to the Russian positions, and furthermore, this is the vital, let's say, direction for the Russians. Furthermore, Zaporozhye, according to a Russian referendum, is, let's say, considered as the part of Russia. So that's why the Ukrainians are building few waves of defense. This one, as you can see, was built already. Now the Ukrainians are focused to create the second defense belt. So there are going to be a significant number of defense belts on the eastern part of Zaporozhye, with the purpose not to allow the Russians to capture the territory. So we'll follow the situation as well. The Ukrainian sources reported that they managed to liberate and establish complete control over the island that's located in the Dnipro River. We will adjust the map showing this island as a part of Ukraine, but according to, for example, our maps, the military summary map, as you can see, this area considered as a gray zone, and we didn't have any videos or any geolocations that confirmed the Russian presence there. So most likely the Ukrainians managed just to maintain the gray zone and to get closer to the Russian bank of Dnipro River, let's say as a part of preparation before further landing operation on the Russian side of Kherson. During the previous few days, the Russians attacked also the, let's say, some oil refineries in the port, usually in Odessa area, and there is still a very big fire on this area. Now we are moving to the north in direction of, let's say, Kupiansk. We have two interesting updates from the territory as well. The Ukrainians, as a result of counter-offensive operations, managed to restore control over the tree lines, over the tree forests, let's say, in direction of Kremenaya. So there are counter-attacking. The Russians haven't managed to enter Terny, Yampolovka during the Russian attempts to attack on this direction in January, February, and March. Now the Ukrainians in a counter-attack state, and the Russians slowly but step by step are falling back towards Kremenaya. So most likely the Ukrainians will continue their attempts to restore control over the positions they lost during the Russian offensive. Very interesting details continue receiving from Kislovka-Kotlarovka area. According to information we have, the Russians established complete and full control over the village by the name of Kislovka. And if we summarize everything, this is approximately the territory that is already under Russian control. And according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, the Russians conducted first offensive attempts to enter Kotlarovka. And most likely, due to the fact that Kotlarovka is already semi-encircled from the north, from the east, and from the south, most likely the Ukrainians will decide to fall back very soon from this direction towards N26 road, towards more reliable positions. So we are expecting the Ukrainian, let's say, retreat process. Also, the sources reported that the Russians managed to maintain the gray zone in direction of the village by the name of Pishane, and the Russians got as close as possible to the village, and most likely the Russians are about to start the offensive operation on this direction. But when talking about topographical map, we see that the Russians just establish control over the lowlands, and now they need to move at least 100 meters to the west in this direction, which will allow them to enter the hills and to be on the same level with the Ukrainian positions, which will also allow the Russians, let's say, to conduct this possible offensive operation in direction of Pichane more smoothly in comparison with possible, let's say, solutions and possible way of development of the situation right now. So this is approximately the things that are going to take place on this direction as well. During the previous night, so during the previous few days, the Russians conducted a few Iskander strikes in Kharkiv. On the video, we can see the results of strikes, and the source reported that the temporary positions of the armed forces of Ukraine were destroyed. Furthermore, Russia continued preparation before the Victory Day. More and more armored vehicles of Western production were already deployed in Moscow. People can walk through the streets and take a look at these captured armored vehicles of the Western production. fraction of NATO production. According to information we have, the Russians have already, let's say, brought to Moscow the Humvees, Huskies, Bushmaster, Turkish Kipri, Mamba Mk2, Australian Starperch, Pinzauer, let's say military ambulance. Also we have the Leopards 2A6, we have Bradleys, we have Marders, we have lots of different types of weapon. Most likely the Russians will try to bring to Moscow before the Victory Day the Abrams tanks, a few Abrams tanks that were destroyed during the battle for Avdiivka, so everything is ongoing. Now let's move to Kiev. We have additional updates from this area as well. Zelensky stated that Ukraine has fulfilled all the necessary conditions for the real start of negotiations on the accession or to the European Union, and now the European Union must fulfill its obligations. So I'm not sure that European Union is ready to take Ukraine as a part during the war period of time as a part of European Union, but maybe Zelensky knows something. Also, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said that Kiev is negotiating with Washington to conclude a large-scale agreement that provides for military, financial and other types of support for the next 10 years. Ukraine's goal is to make this agreement the strongest among the similar agreements. I'll remind you that during the previous months, the Ukrainians conducted the same agreement with different countries like France, like Poland, like Canada, like United Kingdom, and now they're trying to conduct the same, to sign the same agreement with the United States of America. Furthermore, we have, let's say, additional reports that this summer NATO countries will send F-16s, and the sources and people in Business Insider stated that F-16 fighters that will arrive in Ukraine in this summer will face the most difficult test in the history of their experience. Of course, everybody, I believe, want to see the situation, want to see how these F-16s, let's say, story will be finished in Ukraine. Furthermore, we have reports that the Russians destroyed few temporary points, temporary positions of Ukrainians in the western part of Ukraine. In this video, we'll see the results of another strike with Iskander on the some camp in the western part of Ukraine. And we have additional report from Ukraine that Kyiv decided to strengthen the border with Hungary and Romania in order to stop the mass flight from mobilization. We saw lots of videos during the past, so the Ukrainians, as you can see, as I understand, as I remember, the Ukrainians are planning to increase the number of personnel along the border for another 15,000 people. Also, Ukraine has asked Poland for the possibility of stopping social payments to Ukrainian refugees in order to force them to leave Poland for the and return back to Ukraine. Mainly, the Ukrainians are asking to do this with men. And we have the videos of significant number of armored vehicles that have already been redeployed to Poland, and these are like armored vehicles that we can find in the Polish, let's say, port towns like Gdańsk and many others. They are ready to be redeployed for Ukraine. They're just waiting for some signatures, and they're just waiting for an order. Significant number of armored vehicles, as you can see. Most likely the summer of 2024 is going to be very hot in all meanings. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.